we are ensuring that kids succeed cradle to career. So if you are new to our organization and you haven't learned very much about us, I encourage you to visit our website. That is c2cmn.com to learn more, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today because I have 15 minutes to talk about where we've been in the last 6 months. And I don't know about you, but time has been quite a roller coaster for us here in the last 6 months. So before we get started, oops, let me back up there. Before we get started, I do want to honor the fact that we stand on the land of the Wahpeton people, and they have stewarded this land for generations, and we are thankful for them and how they have done that for us. In addition, I want to honor and recognize that 2020 has been a year like no other. We've all experienced loss and grief in very different ways and in very different real personal and professional ways. And I want to honor that, that as we are reflecting through today in our time together, that we are all coming from different times and different experiences through COVID. So today's schedule, most of you have already registered, so you know what breakout sessions you will be in, but I just wanted to give an overview. We'll spend some time together until about 1:15, and then you'll go into your first 45-minute content session. We'll come back together at 2 in the main room. We're very excited that Dominique Jones will be visiting us from the Twin Cities, and he has prepared a spoken word piece for us. We will then go into our content section starting at 2:15, and then we'll come together. Dominique will perform another smaller piece for us at 3, and then we'll close out our sessions together. So let's dive right in. 2020 has seen a pivot in strategy, a pivot to the pivots, and then yet another pivot after that. So it is hard to believe that 6 months ago, we were actually doing our other community presentation in which we were interacting as a community to the annual report. But now we are together again in our learning event. And again, we're so excited for you to be here. So one thing that I would like to note that in all of this, we are a member of Strive Together, which is our national nonprofit. They have 65 communities doing this work across the nation. And also they have a theory of change in order to make sure that every child across our nation is successful cradle to career. And in that theory of change, there are 6 different gateways. And we met a huge milestone this year, which is that we moved from exploring and emerging into the sustaining gateway. What that really means is it means that we have proven as a community that we're invested and that we are dedicated to this work going forward. And that was built really with the people that you see here. So we have 23 members of our leadership table, many of whom were part of the beginnings of Cradle to Career, and 23 members represent 21 different organizations across the community who are dedicated to creating this vision. And this vision really is that they have put in front of us is a healthy community for all. And that is something that takes every organization, every person to make that happen. We have a staff of 6 that you see there. Some are given of their time from other organizations. For example, Zenny Ali, who is our administrative extraordinaire specialist. She, part of her time is given in kind by United Way of Olmsted County. Amy Wilford is also an employee of United Way of Olmsted County, and we are able to contract some of her time. We have 2 departments, if you will. Claudia Tabini is coordinating the community engagement department, and Kelsey Zupke heads up the research and data department with data analyst Cindy Hansel. So this is our small but mighty team working to support the real drivers of this work, which are our networks. We have 2 out of our 7 networks open. Our first network is high school graduation. They're working to ensure that every high schooler is graduating ready for their next step. And they are convened by Chad Campbell, CEO of Boys and Girls Club. And there's 18 different organizations working on this initiative. And our other kindergarten readiness network, who are working collectively to ensure that every child who enters kindergarten enters ready to succeed. We are lucky to have both Sandy Seymour and Amanda Lasik from Families First of Minnesota convening this group of organizations who are ensuring to make sure that this happens for our kids. So those are the people. Let's pause. If you will go down to the little bar where it says more for some of you and it reactions, can you just give all of these folks a little clapping hands emoji? Look at that. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Justin. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. These are the people who keep continually working to make sure that this is a reality for our community, and we honor their work each and every day. So let's talk a little bit about our response to COVID. COVID came as a global pandemic. It is our crisis. When we talk about crises, Cradle to Career talks about these in these 3 phases, that there was a response, there was a recovery, and there was a recalibration. So our response, when we think about the response, like I said, we were all together in John Marshall's cafeteria. It seems like so long ago, but it was a mere 6 months ago. And we had no handshake signs, 3 buffet lines, and hand sanitizer all over that cafeteria. And 3 days later, we went into a stay-at-home order, and 5 days later, our children left their classrooms, unbeknownst to them, for the last time for the school year. So how did we respond as an initiative? First and foremost, we reached out to our network partners to see what they needed. And many of them said we needed time and space because the programming that they were preparing for summer was now on hold, and we didn't know what that was going to look like going forward. So we as a staff, as Backbone staff, we're really good at facilitation. We're really good at data. We're really good at supporting initiatives. So we partnered with United Way and a nonprofit consortium to support getting trusted resources out to our families so that they knew where they could go for food, knew where they could go for incidentals, and they knew where they could go to get trusted resources. We really rallied to make sure that 211, which is a resource through United Way, was the first layer of support, so that when people called into that, they knew that they would be directed to resources that would be around for the long haul. What we did tactically as an organization is that we filled the gap of new learnings. We were all learning very quickly and on the spot. So what we found is that through our organizations, they were now serving their clients in a totally different way because they weren't seeing them in person, and they wanted to make sure that they were checking in on them. So we set up some webinars that covered distance learning, accessing resources, mental health, social and emotional learning, and many others. So about May is when we started to go into the recovery phase, there we go. And we checked in with our networks. They came together and they reprioritized their strategies that they were working on to focus both on urgent and immediate needs, because those were changing very quickly, as well as the longer term strategies that they had already agreed upon to that. And in both of our networks, they were really looking at kind of the purview, keeping in the purview, what was happening with housing, what was happening with food, and what was happening with partner programming. In addition to that, our data and research team came back together and they started projects that were already in the works. So they partnered with our partner, Rochester Public Schools, in order to do the community schools needs assessment. They helped gather all of that data and put it into a report that informed and drive the decision-making for this coming school year, as well as working with our partner IMAA. We worked to pull together data that they had gathered across 107 families, and we put that data into a report that they could then use to drive their decision making. And we also consulted with our individual network partners, and we were able to partner with them and provide some needed resources around developing logic models, developing a new team culture. How do you do a team culture now that we are all remote and trying to do 3 or 4 different jobs at once, and then around developing grant narrative. So now we're recalibrating. So starting in August and moving forward, our networks have really leaned into the short-term strategy when we started to realize where our children were going to be in regards to learning. So many of our partners shifted their programming to respond to the community need. They were standing up distance learning centers and really trying to figure out how do we give parents and caregivers the supports they need in order to really support the learners in their life. Research and data. Sorry, hold on just one second. There we go. We're really looking at finishing up the research code of ethics, which you can hear about in Saj's presentation today about code development of processes and procedures for organizations. We were also developing data to inform and also drive our decisions as networks. And right now we're starting to pick up where we left off pre-COVID and gathering those partner performance measures. So a lot has happened. And so why are we talking about intersections? So intersection is really what we're talking about is literally where 3 things come together at a point. So I have waterfalls there because I'm from the West Coast and I love whitewater rafting. And if you are a kayaker or a whitewater rafter, you know where there are places of convergence of water, there is turbulence. So these are where your rapids get a little bit harder, where the navigation through the river becomes, well, a little bit chaotic, dependent on the water flow and dependent on what time of year you're in. We're not talking about intersectionality. Intersectionality is different. Intersectionality is about person and all the different parts and layers of a person that come together to create that individual way of seeing and being perceived and working through a community. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about today is truly what happened when our community systems converged and intersected with a force as big as a global pandemic and also the murder of George Floyd. That's what we're talking about today. So where are we because of this intersection? 2020 amplified the importance of addressing longstanding systemic inequities. It's not that our education system or our social systems were perfect before. All COVID-19 did was rip back perhaps a covering and a cloak. And what has taught us is 4 different things and 4 different processes that we must take moving forward. Number 1, our March 10th convening, when we brought racial equity and a definition of that to the community said, no, not without us. Don't create things about us without us. And really, if you really want equity, you need to intentionally include. And so we boiled down our definition of racial equity to intentional inclusion. Are we making sure that everyone is included in the decision-making process? This means that we need to take some time for personal reflection. Where are we in the system? What do we give? What do we take? What do we need to change? And that then takes us to systems examination. How are we examining the systems? And also how are then we getting to transformation? So when we started to look at this convergence, what we found is in the data is that students have a similar aspiration regardless of their race. They want to do good in school. They want to pursue things that they're interested in. The second thing that we learned in the data is that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted communities of color. And the last thing that we learned is that the digital divide is truly tangible. When we think about students' aspirations, we found in the Minnesota student survey that 86 to 90% of students care about how well they do in school. And 98 to 99% of students want to pursue subjects that interest them. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. Our kids want to do well in school and they want to learn. But it becomes increasingly hard to learn when your background is disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Our Latinx Minnesotans are 7 times more likely to get a positive case of COVID-19 than white Minnesotans. And Black Minnesotans are testing positive 6 times higher than white Minnesotans. So I'm a student and I really want to do good in school, but now I have an added layer of stress of sickness potentially in my family. And overwhelmingly, when we think about the digital divide, we understand that reliable access to internet was 100% a major challenge that truly showed the inequity in our system. And we even felt that as we were working through charter cutting out for days upon days or for hours upon hours where we weren't able to do our work. So now imagine that that is happening in a student's home in which they don't have enough of devices and they don't have ample internet access in order to support all of the learning that's happening within that house. So what's next? We're going to be bold. And we're going to say there's no going back, especially when you think about the news that we've heard even just over the course of the last week and a half. We're not going back. And so what does that mean for us? That means that we have to figure out how we're going to move forward. And how do we do that? Creating spaces in which our kids who are 98 and 99% saying that they want to pursue things that they're interested in, how do we make sure that we as a community are responding in alignment and in coordinated fashion and collectively in order to address those needs? So what to look up for from us? Our community engagement department will have a parent outreach specialist gathering real-time barriers from families and connecting them to resources. We will also have our Support Your Local Learner campaign starting soon. And these are short videos that actually support any caregiver and family in order to understand the prioritized strategies that their students are learning in both English language arts and math. And these are from the state. These are the state standards for these grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then our data and research will continue to grab those performance measures so we can tell you locally what is the story that we know is happening in this time of COVID. So what can you do? Get involved, volunteer with a network partner, advocate for statewide broadband. We know that that is important and we need it everywhere, and invest in the systems transformation that we need. We appreciate you and we appreciate your time that you are giving to us today. And we hope that today is a day of learning and a day of connection and a day of reflection as we think about the intersections that COVID has handed to us.